Hey, ladies and gentlemen, if I could get your attention, thank you very much for joining us here today. We're part of the Tyson Foods family. We're in the fresh meats division. In front of you today, I have Chef Kuan and Chef Matthew Freistadt with Newly Weds, the Disruptive Q BBQ team. Today, we're going to show you 3 new items that were recently developed with the help of Chef Kuan and fabricating a different way of the pork loin. And we think it has some great opportunities, not only in the pork barbecue world, but in the world of food service. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chef Kuan and Chef Matt. And thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for being here. As you can tell by my accent, I'm not from here. So having said that, you know, I look at pork really differently. I know pork in this country, we're taught a certain cuts and it stops there. So I was asked a couple of years ago to be part of a project and looking at pork, all the utilization, what else can we do to it? And I asked my leadership, you know, if I could cut it differently, can you cut it differently? And we were able to cut it differently and where it made sense. So everybody knows Iron Chef Morimoto? Yes? So I ran his restaurant. I was his exec chef in Napa, California. Before that, I was sous chef for Thomas Keller at French Laundry. I cooked a little. I did a lot of butchering in both of those restaurants. And when I was at Morimoto, my guide was the National Association of Meat Processor Fabrication book. That's like the Bible, right? So I was measure my ribs, measure my belly, measure my cuts, and then I'll put them in the restaurants. And it turns out at the end of the day is I can't make money cutting meat like that. You know, Tyson Fresh Meat does the same thing I do and sell boxes and boxes of it. I wasn't a cheap hire, so it's a lot of labor put into it to cut the same thing. Then the epiphany was, you know, if we were going to make money in the restaurant business, we had to cut pork differently. And I ended up cutting pork differently to fit my menu, and my menu was fluid in order to absorb all those cuts, right? So you have trotters, you have tails, you have all the stuff that normally you don't see, you can't find anywhere. I was able to get all of those, and for that, you know, that was actually really valuable to me because I was able to show things that nobody else can, and that was the amazing part. And when I got to be on this side of the business, on Tyson Fresh Meat, I realized that our processing line are really fast. We don't cut for value. We cut for speed and we cut for volume. So we run really fast and make pennies. Well, you know, pork ling price hasn't changed since 1973. I think the pork ling price in 2015 was roughly same as 1973. Well, gas has gone up, labor has gone up for sure, overhead's gone up. So we're at the point that nobody can make money from it and nobody does anything to it to make it interesting. You know, back in the days, if you want something cut differently, they'll cut it for you. But these days, no, we can't, right? The margin's so thin that we can't really do anything fun with it. We can't really make it interesting because we're just trying to get that number through the system. So the cuts that we're looking at today, we're gonna look at a loin cut, and we're gonna look at 3 loin cuts made from 2-piece. So what you see in front of you, and this is anybody Italian? I'm adopted Italian. So a porchetta and a loin rack. So here's 2 loin rack here. One of this loin rack is paired up with this, made from 1 piece of loin. And remember I was saying that we need to run a lot of volume through? Our hog's gotten bigger. We all know that, right? Your pork chop back in the day was like that. It fits nicely on the plate, meat in 2. Now today, your pork chop's yay size, sits on your 10-inch plate. You don't have room for anything else. Not even the kale and the parsley that goes on it. What are you gonna do with it, right? So the idea was, how do we get to a smaller size pork chop that doesn't really dry out, you know, doesn't dry out as fast, and gives you a little more leeway in how to cook it, right? It's thicker, it's got a bone on, you know it eats well because it's got a bone on. Well, normally if an account comes to us and says, we want you to make this, sure, we'll make that. I'm gonna take everything else and grind it. That's what we normally do. That's our normal business model. Well, we've never really looked at it holistically as a whole piece and say, can we make value out of both of these? So the end user doesn't have to pay through the nose for something like this plus all the trim, right? So we're able to go back in and say, you know what, we can utilize a lot of this. And I'm a big guy. I like my pork and fat on, like I do. So skin, fat, meat rolled up, tied up nicely, looks like a butcher. You know, attend to it. We'll eat this piece. This piece will. I'm gonna ask Chef Matt.
Yep.
I'm gonna feed you. Fewer questions that way.
Yeah, give me the.
And it's harder to complain if your mouth is full, so we'll feed.
All right. So, from the barbecue world and restaurant owners and caterers, coming outside and doing this for 17 years, on the barbecue side and as a research chef, this is, for me, it's a different view. And if we had this, you know, in catering 10, 15 years ago, we'd be ordering this up. So, pretty passionate about it. But one of the coolest things today is going to be these rib pops. And we'll explain. I don't want to jump ahead and steal the thunder, but for barbecue people, these rib pops are going to be it.
Yeah.
But right now we have this beautiful little mini porchetta loin.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so that is a skinless version. We smoked the skinless version because the skin on will tend to be chewy. The skin on version will be for roasting. You know, I roasted with a salt cap, 300 degrees. Take the internal about 120. Take the salt off. Bump the heat up to 425. The skin crisp up. Ready to go. And it's, you know, your classic porchetta is a loin with a belly wrap around it. That thing is that big. That thing is that long. Belly's expensive. Loin's expensive. By the time you add a labor, what are you going to do? You can't sell that. And no, it's not a prime rib, right? You're not going to put on a Zeppelin, go out and slice pork. It just doesn't work that way. So the whole point is like this is smaller, easier to handle. Cook what you need. You can split in as many ways you need to roast what you need for the operation. That version of it is just a skin wrapped around it. The loin has a tendency to dry out. So current processing methods that we take all the fat off. Well, you know what dries off? The loin dries out. This has the fat wrapped around it. It protects it. The lean meat is the last to cook. And I like the fat on it, and I prefer the meat with fat on it. There will be string in it, yes. Any questions while we're waiting to be fed? Y'all spoil your appetite. I saw you eating chicken.
What you have in that pan, is that what he's cutting?
This pan, except the one that he has is the skinless version.
When you say skinless, you mean no fat?
No, so this one has a skin and fat underneath. That has no skin, but still the fat. Absolutely.
Okay, so there's a difference.
So would you eat that skin? Or?
This roast up, the skin is the best part.
Oh yeah.
It's like chicken skin. Fried chicken skin,
Yeah, it's real crispy.
chicharron. The other thing about, I think the other key points that, you know, if you look at consumer plates these days, you go on the food magazines, it's about portions. Portions has gone down a lot. Meat portions gone down from your 14, 16, 18 ounce to 9, 10, 11, 12 ounce. Each one of those bone is about 12 ounce. So nicely portioned. You can roast 2 bones and be within, you know, a pound. Slice it nicely.
How long is the average of Frenching that?
How long what?
How long does it take you to French that?
Yeah.
French this.
French this into what it is.
Yeah.
From a production standpoint and high volume, it's about 22 minutes.
How long you by yourself? I mean,
So
just
as an individual, I mean, it's probably, if you were to fabricate that on your own, it's going to take you all of 30 plus minutes.
Yeah.
So now you can get something like that, I guess order it, call your neighborhood grocery store and order, if they do Tyson food, you can order a piece like that?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
On Amazon.com.
We got a lot.
4 hours. So they went in, Chef Matt, 4 hours smoked?
Yeah, these were about 4 hours, about 250, 270 range, dry, just hickory wood smoke. We like to run pork a little faster and hotter, just so that the fat renders. We feel that cooking it. And this is a lean cut, so we did not inject this. This is just cooked with dry hickory wood.
Yep.
What temperature?
We went to about 145. It's like
No, that got higher. That went up to one. Remember 154?
Yeah.
With dyslexic, 154. We pulled out 154. But I mean, we're here really to get your feel. Like, does it make sense that we're doing this? Does it fit the bill? Are we on the right path? We'd love to hear what you have to say about it. You know.
They all have skin.
Yeah.
This one looks a hint different than the other one.
It's the way that it was wrapped.
How it rolled.
Yeah.
They are all natural cut, so you know it's not coming out of a machine. They're hand cut by butchers, and so the hog has different shapes, and you're going to yield different. Similar, I mean.
Yeah, and the shoulder end would be a little bit different than the sirloin. How are we doing for the next slice?
We are ready to go. So if you want to talk on the
Yeah, so the Petite Rack is
classic.
so we smoked it, but you cook it as you would any pork chop. What would be nicer, a little bit brine? You can, you don't have to. But Chef Matt, can you hold that up? That's beautiful, by the way. Wow. Right? And that, if you think about it, this two pieces is actually made from one loin. That was the byproduct of this. Or this could be the byproduct of that, however you want it. Right? So, you know, I'm Chinese and I eat turnips, but I eat the stuff in the ground. And I come here, y'all eat turnip greens. So what happens to stuff under the ground? So what's trash to me is value to you. What's trash to you is value to me. And we never really, we never look at it both ways, right? So the idea here is to look at that both ways. It's value to somebody. If you're an Italian, if you're a sandwich operation, you know, a porchetta is trying to trend, right? It's trying to become popular, but nobody can afford the labor, nobody can afford the raw material. Well, if it becomes a trim product, and there's a trim credit from that, porchetta totally makes sense. And you're at a price point that doesn't make sense not to use it. And the reason we're showing you all this today is restaurant owners are small business owners of America, right? Restaurant owners are looking for a little edge to get ahead the next restaurants. Everybody buy box pork. Everybody use the same starting material. How do you get ahead? Well, you can butcher it. Well, butcher is incredibly expensive, right? Butchers are, for how much they cut in a day, it doesn't make sense volume-wise. But if you give the right tool to the right restaurant chain, they're going to do a lot with that. You know, they're the people that put flour on the table. Flour doesn't taste like anything. Well, so we can charge a little more per plate. Well, if you give them the right tool as a starting material, they can do a lot with that. And we'll talk more for the next piece, but I like to say cooking, meat cuts is like architecture. You talk about forms and you talk about function, right? Eastern Soviet bloc apartment buildings are functional, but they're ugly as hell. And there are some really high-end apartment building that's incredibly gorgeous, but they're not functional, right? So if we change the form of something, you change the function. How many people eat chicken here? Okay, how many people eat chicken nuggets? Everybody else, right? It's still chicken, but you change the form. And that, you get kids 2 years old, 3 years old eating chicken nuggets that won't eat a chicken drumstick, that won't eat a chicken breast. The point here is that we're changing the form to get to new customers. If you think about it, all the customers buying from you today will buy a little bit more. Sure, they'll buy 1% more, 2% more, 3% more. But if you have something new that gets you to completely different customers, that's new business. That's where you need to be.
What's cool? That on most of this rack or the other, you get a good amount of the dark meat that runs along the chain along the bottom of the loin, and that's where a lot of that good flavor is in that dark pork meat. And good marbling in there, so it's nice to have that, especially on the other one too. But these are great. I mean, for any banquet.
They look like a lamb chop. They look like a veal chop. Right?
Family reunion or anything.
Lamb chop is what, $15 a pound?
Look how juicy that is.
Veal chop is $15, $17 a pound, right? So if you have a wedding operation, you're doing weddings, you want something that looks amazing on a plate. That's something that's.
I've been watching you gaze at that for a while. Look like your first bride.
First and only bride. I mean, the other conversation that you have at a nice carving station, it's portion controlled, right?
aside from that, you know, from end to end, you're getting 12 to 13 bones, and it's 100% usable, the whole part.
Yep.
So, food cost wise, it would make me happy back in the
Here,
day.
let's put it this way instead.
So there's one more cut that the chef is going to show you, and these two are fabricated obviously from the same loin. The other one is just a different version of a St. Louis rib.
So, in the beginning of this project too, we were brought in to kind of give a little insight to what some of the barbecuers like out of ribs, and that is we always get ribs that have different length bones, and then we dealing with 2-inch bones up to 5-inch bones, and for competition, that's a little stressful. So one of the beautiful things about this, and there's no sanctioning organization that could rule against it, but for barbecue comps, the labor that's in this is a spare rib lollipop. All right, so this is something that back in the day QL would try and pull off, or whoever. Question?
You could enter that?
You could. You could enter it. The judges may be a little shell shocked at first. But we'll leave that to the social media.
Let me open it up.
Because they jump on the social media bandwagon. And that's the problem with some of our blind judges. Is,
Our blind judges.
Chef Matt, will you?
some of the issues
Matt.
is they see stuff on
Will you
social
hand me
media
a knife
and
I
they
can
think
cut
that's
raw
what
with?
they're supposed
Raw.
to be getting.
It'd work better if they were blind.
I just need to open the bag.
Tell me to my face you don't like it. Instead, everybody gets on Facebook and gripes about the 4 or 6 that they got.
Give me that knife, I'll show it there's nothing. You need it again or no?
No, I'm good. You want to pull out the?
This is my first cook on this rib, and I went with the route of fast and hot. So 275, 250. Get that fat marbled in that spare rib, but at the same time, it can go the distance to 185 like a pork shoulder, because all
Make sure you
that
talk about
marbling
Yeah.
is up there, and I think our ribs, when we normally cook them, are up in that range anyway. I don't usually tempt rib meat, but I'm pretty sure it's up there. So we went to the 180, 185 range, and we're going to see what we get.
So y'all like barbecue, right? Don't you wish you can have barbecue like all year long? I'm from up north, and we only get barbecue in the summer. Rest of the United States don't eat barbecue all year long, right? So most of the time, processors make products and we put in the freezer waiting for summer. Well, remember I say if you change the form, you change the function. So this is a spare rib, right? That is a spare rib. That is a spare rib.
This is a 2/3 rack. Something happened.
Yeah, somebody ate the other half.
The other bones, but,
Somebody's doing one of these back in the back.
he was a midget hybrid.
So this is a spare rib. We really just free the meat up and roll it over and kept all the intercostal on it because that's the delicious part. Rolled it up. I actually had a friend that took one of these, opened it back up, stuffed the middle, roll it back up again, and cooked all of it. And I asked him what he stuffed the middle with. He's like, duh, it's sausage. Stuff pig and pig, of course. So remember I was talking about getting new consumers? It's hard to see barbecue at airports because everybody's got a luggage. That's a lot of wet naps to clean your hand before you get to your flight. It's hard to see barbecue at weddings. The moment you get barbecue sauce on a wedding dress,
So
it's
this
kind
is
of
an
game
11
over.
bone. This is an 11 bone.
They're all 11 bones.
They are?
Yeah, we don't do
Okay,
12s.
Okay.
So if you have this at a wedding, it's a lot cleaner eating. You see how small it's the smaller racks? It's appetizers, right? It's appetizers. It's mobile. It's a pass app.
How much does this add to the pricing for the end user? They've got to have
Ask my sales guy. Ask my sales guy.
Let's be honest, it's an offline product. We can't do that in mass production, so we have to take it offline. So roughly, if you're going to look at a St. Louis rib of that nature, with all the processing and manufacturing, the hand tying, the hand, all of it, because every animal comes with 14 ribs. We cut off roughly 3 to make it an 11 rack. So you're getting the center cut, the sweet spot of the St. Louis rib. You're looking at a neighborhood of probably $7.
I'll just let them know there's string on
But
it.
it
There's
comes
tie.
already tied. It's all tied. So all you have to do is add your rub and cook. So there's a lot of work that we've taken out for you. But unfortunately, as a packer, you have to try and compensate that back and make a small margin. And trust me, we're making a small margin.
So the other thought is, I mean, he just got outbid it. So the other thing is that if you think about it, when you serve a spare ribs, you serve what, 6 bones, half a rack? 2 bones is about the same amount of meat as a back rib. All the meat is on there.
And if you look at that's the whole complex of the spare rib, that you would have bone from the bone being cut on one end to the other. It's just formed differently, it's shaped differently, and your guests will see it in a different format. It looks beautiful. It has that lamb rack presentation, and
it looks like a chop.
Opportunity to be totally different with a St. Louis spare rib than what you currently are using right now.
It looks like a chop, but eats like a rib. Right? Chops everybody like because it looks sexy, has a bone on it, and the bone's exposed. But most of the time the chops are dry. But this is juicy because it's a rib, and you got to cook it like a rib. The funny part is that you ask how come this is not a supermarket. The first time I gave it to a bunch of chefs to use, they undercooked it.
We have enough to give it.
And they looked at it and they go, oh, it's a chop. So they cooked it gently, let it carry, thinking that, and then. Yeah, make sure that you pull the string off of it.
We're getting as much of it off as we.
Yeah. So
There's sauce up here, folks, if you like sauce.
they undercooked it, and then I told the chefs. I mean, if the chef make the mistake thinking that it's a chop, the consumer's going to do the same thing. So we want to make sure that the expert gets it first, because the experts know how to work with it before we give it to the consumer in the long run. Absolutely, right? So the first thing they do, spare ribs, they make into a St. Louis. Right, because nobody spare ribs don't fly. Absolutely. The other thing we've noticed that if you ever cook spare ribs, they're pretty wide. Pretty wide. So in that double wide, that extra floor space, in the space that it takes to smoke 2 spare ribs, you can smoke 3 to 4 of these racks. So imagine your throughput in your barbecue. Imagine your labor. Instead of smoking 4, 5, 6 cycles over the weekend, smoke 1 or 2 cycles, and you get plenty of throughput.
What are these guys called?
They will be called French spare ribs. Yeah, pretty simple.
All right, guys. So, competition-wise, you would have to cut these whole and then pull off the string without wrecking the pork chop. Again, these weren't designed for the competition. I'm just sharing my insight after doing it for so long. But we don't do a whole lot of KCBS anymore, so we'll see. We have some teams out there that are going to spearhead it with the judges this year, and there's some pretty good top teams that are going to do some skunk work testing throughout the circuit, just to see what the results are. That's it, just data. No. I mean, I'm friends with a couple of each, and we're not focused heavily on just the barbecue community, not me, but the product itself. It's more, I'm sharing my insight as a team guy.
Oh, so these products are patent pending, but we'd love to get your opinion. We have a video crew here. Don't hate us. We love to hear good things, bad things, but we love to hear it because, the barbecue community is really important to us. Thanks for allowing us being here to kind of chat you up about the new things we're working on. We think it's cool, but it's our baby. We want you to think it's cool as well. So don't go hungry. Keep eating. Everything's happier when your mouth is, when you're eating. And
kind of 2 mindsets, for food service and your backyard. We want to hear both.
There's so little margin in it. By the time it gets to the further processor, they can't make any money, so they won't do it. That's why you haven't seen any pork innovation for a long time, because those are the people that traditionally further fabricate into the things you want. Well, the margin in it doesn't allow them to do that because the bones, the trim they make, they can't do anything with, right? So that goes in the garbage. They go to render. They'll grind the meat maybe. But that's about it.
We cook a lot of pork for comps usually anyway, like 4, 5, 6 racks sometimes. And so if you only had to cook 2 or 3, and if you can get 4 or 8 of perfect ones like that for your box, and you dial in your tenderness. That's money maker right there.
Starting from the pork St. Louis rib, as a personal opinion, I wasn't that happy with it. The cut to me does not lend itself well to eating. If you, it was cooked well, but with the, to me, with the trash, not the trash meat, with the meat that gristle and whatever that is rolled to the inside, it makes it harder to eat than I would like to. Going to the pork chop, you couldn't ask for a better pork chop. Perfectly cooked, perfectly cut. When you looked at it on the plate, it was anything you would want to eat. If it was served to you in a restaurant and you saw that pork chop, you would be happy before you ever ate it. The pork loin was a good pork loin, but I wasn't really happy with the way it was cooked, but then that was just the cooking. The pork loin itself had a great flavor on the outside. And I did like the pork loin, and it would lend itself well to any pork loin cooking, except it's pork pancetta.
Correct.
Which is virtually the same thing to me. On these two, if I was changing anything on the pork pancetta, the cooking would be the only thing I would look at changing. When you're cooking, sometimes it doesn't go exactly like you want, but that's my opinion. The pork chop, I couldn't say change anything. The pork chop was perfect, is my opinion. There's nothing I would change. To be honest with you, with the pork rib, I just wasn't, I didn't like it, and I don't see that changing.
I was really impressed with the butchering prep to get something like a spare rib to leapfrog ahead of the baby back, because I love the baby back rib. I've always loved the baby back rib.
Perfect.
I think it's got a lot of fat in it, a lot of meat, but to take a spare rib and roll it like that and get all of that fat in one place like a medallion and that bone coming out like the presentation is just awesome. I would love to have 10 of my friends in my backyard and have them in line and watch that slicing go on as they came through and plated their meal. It would just be just a great presentation look. It really is. I think the uphill battle is going to be trying to find a way to win with that rib in competition. If you can win with that cut in competition, you're gonna springboard this product. Get the judging association to take a hard look at, of course, by rule, as the gentleman said, by rule, that cut is legal in competition for ribs. But legal and the judges buying in are two different things, because people don't like to change, especially judges. And if you can climb the hill or jump the hurdle, however you want to say it, of getting judges to buy into this is a product that can be competitive, you're taking a huge leap forward. I'm happy with seeing something new done with something that hasn't been new in decades.
Yeah, really interesting to me. I'm a spare rib cook is my specialty. I do KCBS cooking, and the problem I have lately is, I literally hand-pick my ribs coming off of a semi-truck right after they cut the tips off. And the last couple of years, it's getting hard to get a good spare rib because of the price of bellies. All that meat's going in the wrong direction for me. So, the attractiveness to that is just so much meat on that thing. Obviously, with competition, I think it'd be a little difficult to get the judges acclimated to that, but it's doable. I think one way to do that is through ancillary competitions, where on Friday nights, before everyone's doing the big money stuff, you come in and hand out 25 of those to 25 teams. They always have sanctioned judges doing that stuff, so you can introduce the product that way and start letting them learn what to look for. Because right now, if a judge is tasting a spare rib, he bites the side, he looks at the bone, he's looking at how the moisture dries on it, and that would just freak them out until they kind of learn what to look for. But I think the potential to cook that is so much better than what I can do on a spare. Go a little bit longer, get a lot more tenderness and flavor to pack in it. You could even inject it if you wanted to. So I love the stuff. I don't mess around with loins too much, but that French loin, I would make that for a party any day of the week. So really nice job, you guys. I'm impressed. A little salty for me. I think pork likes sugar, but Chef Matt's a great cook. He actually helped me get into barbecue. So I think, those ribs especially, is just a matter of learning how to cook them. The loins, I don't think there's any issue there. If you know how to cook a loin, you're going to do even better with that, with those bones in there. The one with that skin wrapped around the outside, oh yeah, I think that will work for sure.
Oh, I love the actual cuts. I love doing new things. I love pork. Pork is my favorite white meat. I love it. And so it's really interesting that someone is working at doing something new and innovative. So I love the cuts. Well, I never cook my pork to 154 like he did. I usually do 140, but then I have time to cover it and let it set and stuff. So one of the cuts, the first cut was a hint dry, mostly in the center. The outer part where the fat was really good, but then as you got towards the center, it was a hint dry. But they don't have the time I have at home to have done the same thing. I personally, the rib. Now the rib, I probably actually like the rib the way it is. That would be nice for a restaurant cut. I probably wouldn't do that at home. But you know how they've come out with that cowboy T-bone thing? On a pork, that's what reminded me of that cowboy T-bone. And I kind of liked how that was done, the other thing, the rib, the loin part. I like that. But the actual rib, I'm not sure I would do that at home.
Chef Matthew Freistadt, corporate chef with Newly Weds Foods. About a year and a half ago, I was invited out with other team members and chefs to tour some of the fresh meat facilities, but we were also there for a workshop. The cuts that Chef created at Tyson for the food service world, and we were tasked with, as innovation, to create different ways to serve it, different flavors, different trends, different applications for the menu, whether it's appetizer, entree, how they're prepared, different cooking. So we had a room with our kitchen with about 17 chefs, and we just innovated for 2 days on these new cuts and some of the by-cuts of these cuts, showing, hey, we can do all this with the extra trim and the main cut. So really so it's been ongoing, and then tasked with helping it with the barbecue section. As a chef, they take you back to, a fine dining setting, but something that's available for the backyard. And so, high-end restaurants are going to spend the time and butcher that, and then we've, craftfully trained the butchers to imitate what the chefs would do and just streamline it. And that's kind of the cool part about the chefs working with the fresh meat side, is being able to collaborate and do that and say, hey, this can be done. You're just moving a knife a different way. And really, so it's came to life. And so all of the cuts are unique, back to your question, and they offer up different categories for all different food service. We had the mini pork fat wrap porchetta roll. It's a mini roast with a little bit of the belly and pork skin wrapped around the pork loin to keep it extra juicy. And we had pork lollipops, which is the spare rib meat rolled into a nice loin rack to look like. So kind of a dark meat of pork kind of lollipop, where, typically a chicken thigh would be dark meat. This pork pop is that dark meat of pork, and that's where all the flavor is. And then we had the Petite Rack French roast. So your holiday season, stuff like that. So there's a lot of different 2 parts of the loin and spare ribs. Those are pretty much what we tried.
So, no, I thought the meat was really good. So obviously it's got the smoke flavour there that we're not normally getting in the UK. And it's just nice to sort of eat it with a collection of people that's enjoying it themselves. I really like the porchetta for the flavours there, the garlic coming through, so the roastness of the meats. And it's really sort of gone through the meats. And the barking on the outside made it a really nice eat. No, I think it's good to see these new cuts. Obviously seeing larger sort of like family things there that can be hacked up in front of people. I think it's just interesting to see these new cuts coming through. So yeah, some of the cuts we've seen there today, we can show them more because I work in the food industry in the UK, and we can present this to some of our customers about family dining more rather than individual eatings. So it's just a good opportunity to come here and learn about those opportunities.
My name is Chef Kang Kuan. I am from Tyson Foods, and we're in Memphis, Maine. The team asked for a culinary support in one of the visits to Tyson Fresh Meat, and as a meat enthusiast, I was invited. And then I was asked at the end of the trip if I could cook a hog in pieces for the team, with the understanding that, just to demonstrate different cuts, different utilities, different cooking temperatures, and why would you cook different things in different ways. My question back to the leadership was if I could cut it differently, do you want me to cut it differently? So we was able to cut it differently. It turns out that it was what Tyson Fresh Meat, and it's been looking for as a very disruptive way into pork processing. So the first cut is the French spare ribs. French spare ribs is made with the intention of changing the rib eating occasion. Ribs is very much a summer thing in the United States. Majority of the ribs is consumed in the summer. So our thoughts here is that if we change the form, does we change the function? So very similar to chicken breast. If you change it to chicken breast into chicken nugget, all of a sudden it becomes mobile, all of a sudden it becomes kid friendly, all of a sudden you can be passed, all of a sudden that you can do all sorts of stuff with it. So the idea here is to change the spare ribs, which is the lowest form of the ribs, into a French spare ribs. Does that get you new customers? Does it get you to serve ribs and serve barbecue where you normally wouldn't? The other two cuts are both made from the loin cut. The other two cuts are the Petite Pork Rack and then the Petite Porchetta, and those were made from bone-in loin rack. Those two is made to address the need of a large pork loin in the industries, right? So gone are the days where you have a nice small pork loin, the nice loin eyes, and he serves really nicely on a plate. Now the loin size is so big, it looks really large on a plate, and it doesn't present very nicely. So the Petite Rack is made to have a nice, very small loin eye. It almost looks like a lamb chop. Of course, at a fraction of the price since it's pork. The byproduct of that is porchetta. It's a very small, more mobile porchetta, skin on one side and fat cover on the other side. It prevents the loin and the inside from drying out. And these two are made in conjunction so that we can make it at a price that it's incredibly affordable. These new cuts will allow the pork industry to get into occasions where you normally don't see pork. In a wedding, you can see it a mobile, at an airport. At an airport, it's hard to find barbecue at the airport, right? There are places around. But at an airport, everybody's traveling, and that's a lot of wet naps trying to clean your hands while you're eating barbecue. Well, if you have a barbecue that doesn't require your hand, you got a little handle in a French spare ribs, that makes it a lot cleaner occasion.